views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Okay, welcome to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. We have a diverse show. First, we have a lawyer who's also a chef. We have a law student, and we have a disability advocate on the show. Three unique guests with three unique personalities. Stay tuned. Today's verdict starts right now. All right, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. We have with us today Torie Atkinson, staff attorney with the Disability Rights Advocates. Torie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Listen, this is an important issue. Anytime we discuss the disabled on this show, I get a tremendous amount of feedback from the viewers, especially the ones in the Bronx, who unfortunately do have a lot of children who are disabled. Could you talk to them a little bit about field trips and why you're on today?
Absolutely. So Disability Rights Advocates represents the American Diabetes Association, as well as three families with children with diabetes. And we brought a class action lawsuit in 2018, actually, challenging a variety of systemic deficiencies of DOE in providing necessary care for these children with diabetes. The parties have been in settlement for the last 3 years, but there are two issues that we had to go to the court on. The first is field trips, and the second is bus transportation. The issue with field trips is that the DOE has historically relied on contract nurses, so-called trip nurses, to come and fulfill field trip requests. So they contact a contract agency and a contract nurse comes and attends the field trip. The problem is that in practice, almost a quarter of those trip requests are not filled. The nurse never shows up. And so this puts parents in a terrible bind. And on the ground, what happens is that the schools know it's very hard to get a trip nurse. So they ask parents to go on the trips for them. This puts an incredible burden on parents who have to miss work, who have to sometimes enlist friends or families to go on the trip, just so that their kid can participate in the same field trips that everyone else can.
You know, Torie, I'm wondering why the schools themselves just don't have one of these field nurses on staff all the time, because I can't imagine that there's a field trip every day, that maybe they should have a couple to be able to just go on the field trip. Has that ever been brought up?
That's a great question. And that is essentially what we asked the court for. We said you should have a float pool of nurses whose job is to go on these field trips, because what was happening is if the nurse doesn't show up, they either leave behind the one child with diabetes or they cancel the trip for everyone. And that just stigmatizes the disability even more, because then everyone in the class knows that it's because that child needed care on the trip and couldn't get it. So what we wound up seeking from the court, and we had a bunch of different options, but one that the city actually endorsed and that the court has ordered is that they have to first identify how many trip nurses they need for this city, and then hire that many people to serve in a float pool and fill in as necessary for those field trips. So exactly what you articulated.
So where are we heading? Because unfortunately, we have a situation where there are more and more children in schools, more and more children who unfortunately are disabled. Are we moving to a point in our city where we're giving a little bit more comfort to the mothers and the fathers of these children, or do we still have a long way to go?
Enormous amount of progress, but I do think that there is always a long way to go, particularly in New York City, which is so huge. As you may know, because I know you guys have covered it before, we also had a case regarding related services for students with individual education programs, IEPs, and those related services hadn't been given to students, and so they just weren't getting them. So there are other issues, but things have been getting better. I think the pandemic has put an incredible amount of pressure on the city and on DOE in particular for many reasons aside from this particular lawsuit. But our sincere hope is that this is really a wake-up call to the DOE, that it does have to prioritize and take seriously the needs of students with disabilities.
Where's the pushback? Where's the defense? What is this? What is the defense to this? What does the DOE say in response? Is it always money? What is it really?
It's money, and it's what they would say operational challenges. So the chief argument that they raised in defense was that there weren't enough nurses, that they have no control over the contract labor pool, and that they advise the schools that they're not permitted to pressure parents. But that ignores the reality, which is that a parent wants their kid to be able to go to the museum. And so we had parents who wrote to the court who did, declarations for the court explaining that, one parent was in Brooklyn and she would get her mom in Staten Island to come out to the field trip just so the kid could go on the trip. And so hopefully once we have a float pool in place, that's going to change. And the hope is that that will change, not just for students with diabetes, but for all students with disabilities, because they utilize the same pool of nurses.
And the float pool is better than having to have the DOE pay the parent who has to miss the day, because I'm sure that's much more expensive than the pool of nurses that go on these trips. So you're right. It stigmatizes the poor child when the trip's canceled and the rest of the class knows it's because of the child, because they couldn't get someone to accompany the child. It's beyond sad. All right, so you have someone watching today. It's a mom or dad with a disabled child. They're feeling a little bit lost. What tips would you give them right now?
With respect to field trips specifically, or just in general?
Just in general, and trying to just get a hold of what they should do with respect to the schools. They want to be heard. What do they speak to?
I think the number one thing is having a good open line of communication with your school. Those are the people on the ground who are most able to help you. And in a lot of cases, especially during the pandemic, when we've been remote and it's been difficult to have those kinds of relationships with people in the school, I would just really encourage parents, talk to the 504 coordinator, talk to the special education coordinator, talk to the vice principal and the principal, make sure that they know that your student has these needs and put them on alert so that they are prepared to address them when things come up.
I know we kind of talk about New York State, we talk about federal on this court, we kind of go back in a couple different places. Do you find that you're getting better acknowledgement of the issues from the state or from the federal, or a little bit of both?
This is focused on New York City. One of the ways in which the state did come up in this case was the other issue we had other than field trips was the administration of glucagon. And so we challenged the failure to provide trained staff on bus transportation. And what that means is you have students who are entitled to take the bus, but in practice, they can't take the bus because there's no one on the bus who knows how to administer glucagon. And glucagon is an emergency medication. It's similar to an EpiPen, and it's administered if a student is experiencing severe hypoglycemia, which is a very severe low blood sugar. That means the student is unconscious, perhaps seizing, can't swallow. It is very, very serious because if not treated immediately, it can lead to death, it can lead to coma, and it can lead to seizure. It is absolutely serious. Oh. And the pushback on that particular training, because we were just saying, have the adults who are on the bus train this. They're already trained to administer EpiPens. This is a very routine thing. Was that the state, there was this belief that the state law would prohibit the bus attendants and drivers from administering glucagon because they were contractors. Now, one of the great victories of this ruling is that the court put that aside and said that's not the case. It doesn't matter if you contract it out, you have to make sure that a child can ride the bus safely. So that's been one issue where the city has been a little bit in tension with the state.
Well, Torie, listen, I want to thank you for coming on. We really appreciate when disability rights advocates, comes on. It's such an important topic that we're discussing today, and your organization does just great work. You truly, truly do. Please come back next couple of months, maybe give us an update, tell us what's been going on, and say hello to everyone at the organization for me, please.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. All right, stay with us. Today's verdict has so much more right after this. All right, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. Every once in a while, I get a guest that I am so happy to have, especially when it's a law student, okay? A future attorney. Chloe Canaan is here. Chloe, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
And you're also interning from my office, so I'm giving you lots of work to do. But before we talk a little bit about the issue of videotaping, when somebody doesn't know you're videotaping, or audio taping, and they don't know they should be audio taping them, which is an assignment that I gave you, and you wrote a wonderful memorandum that I want to share with the viewers. I want to first talk a little bit to you about what it's like being a law student. What year are you in? Where do you go to school? Let's tell the viewers a little bit about it, if you could.
Sure. So I am a first-year law student at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law. I went straight from undergrad right into law school. I got my Bachelor of Arts at the University of Maryland. I double majored in psychology and criminology, and then I just jumped right in, went right to law school, and I'm really liking it so far. You know, it's definitely intimidating when you're first starting, and it's a lot of work, but because I'm genuinely interested in what I'm learning and what I'm reading, even though it is a lot of work, it doesn't feel like it. So I'm definitely really liking it so far. And yeah, it's been a good experience.
And I come from a family of lawyers, as you know, so I don't think I really had a choice. But you had a choice. You didn't have to go to law school. You could have done a lot of things. What motivated you to say, you know what? I know law school's hard, but I want to be an attorney. Where was that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so like you said, I didn't grow up in a family of attorneys. You know, the legal field was kind of new to me. And when I went into college, part of me was thinking, maybe I wanted to go into medicine, maybe I wanted to be a doctor, or there was always a little part of me also that was like, okay, like law school in the back of my mind. So I took a bunch of different classes as a freshman, you know, taking all those gen eds and stuff. There's so many different subjects. And I just kind of found that things like geared more towards the legal field is what I found the most interesting and what I kind of enjoyed learning about and doing the work for the most.
You know what I want to ask you also, because a lot of viewers always ask me this question. They say, you know, David, I want to become an attorney. What should I take in college? Did you find there was anything in college that helped you prepare maybe a little bit better for law school, or not really?
So honestly, I don't think like major wise or minor wise, I don't think there's one major that will prepare you more so than other majors. Yeah. And I don't think there's certain classes you need to take in order to be best prepared for law school. Like I will say, like I took some classes, I took legal writing in college, and I took psychology of law and psychology behind incarceration. So things like that I did find interesting, but I don't think I would be at a disadvantage if I hadn't taken those classes. I
would agree with you. I think psychology best suited me in terms of if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, did it really fall? And you start thinking in the logic kind of worked for me. But I guess the best thing to do is just do well in college. And then if you do well in college, you do well on your LSATs, you get into a good school like you did, and you take it from there. All right. So now that you're a first-year law student and you're really getting in there, and I've been giving you some hard work to do, which is what my job is as an attorney, as a mentor. The issue that I gave you had to do with audio taping somebody when they don't know it and videotaping somebody when they don't know it. And I'm going to throw out a little hypothetical at you, so maybe the viewers can better understand. So I'm on a bus, okay? I'm not a lawyer. I'm just average guy on a bus. And I'm talking to somebody next to me. In my hand is my iPhone, and I'm audio taping it, but they don't know I'm audio taping it. Yes, no, can I do that?
All right, so if
Let's start with New York. Okay,
yeah, I was gonna say, so if we're under New York law if in that situation, like you said, I'm riding a bus and I'm talking to someone and I'm secretly recording that conversation with someone and they don't know, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not breaking the law, because in New York, you don't need consent from every party to the conversation. I am free to record a conversation that I'm a party to, even if the person I'm talking to doesn't know I'm recording. And that recording will likely be admissible as evidence in court.
All right, now let's throw you on a Florida bus, okay?
Yes. So
There's a change.
yeah, in Florida,
The reason I'm bringing up Florida is so many people travel to Florida for part of the year that they always ask me what the rules are there. So just go ahead. I'm sorry. You're on a Florida bus.
Sure. So in Florida, Florida actually used to take the approach that New York does when you only needed consent from one party, but that outlook was amended, and Florida statutory law as of 1974 and still to this day requires that all parties to a conversation have consented for you to record it. So if we were in that same situation and I was on a bus and I was recording someone and that person didn't know, I can't do that, and it won't be admissible evidence in court.
Okay, let's take you back on the New York bus. I somehow have this pen in my pocket. You see, it's a little recorder, and I'm recording the conversation, video recording it, but they don't know it. Yes? No? What do you think?
Yeah, so video is treated much the same way in this situation. Video film is typically admissible, again, as long as one party has consented and as long as a proper foundation can be established. So meaning that by clear and convincing evidence, it's been shown that the videotape is authentic and a true depiction of what actually occurred.
All right, let's throw you back on that Florida bus. Same thing now. The pen's out. I'm someone I'm talking to and got the pen. I'm videoing them. And by the way, people do this all the time. I know they do it all the time. Okay, they're always recording. You don't think you know it, but while they're talking to you, they're recording it. You know, they're hiding it somehow. Well, I don't know if they do it all the time, but I'm sure it's done. What's the answer in Florida?
So in Florida, again, because video is treated much the same as just voice recordings are, you likely would not be able to use that as evidence in court. And again, without consent from all parties, you can't record someone's voice, let alone record them on video.
All right, let's do a little eavesdropping. Okay, I know you don't eavesdrop. None of us do. Okay, but there's a little eavesdropping. It doesn't involve you. You're on the bus and you're recording two other people in New York. Yay or nay?
So you cannot. If you are not a party to that conversation and you have not gotten consent from the people that you're recording or that you're taping, that will likely fall within the statutory definition of eavesdropping. So as I mentioned before, when you're secretly recording a conversation that you're a party to, I mean, that's usually admissible in court because, you know, New York follows the common law rule that evidence is admissible regardless of how it was obtained, obviously with the exception of overriding constitutional or statutory authority. So in this kind of situation, the eavesdropping statute would be the concerning statutory authority. But so if I am a party to a conversation and I'm recording my own conversation, I'm not eavesdropping. But if I'm recording someone else's conversation, let's say it's between two people and neither of them know that I'm doing it, that would fall within the definition of eavesdropping, and that's a crime.
Would that be the same for Florida?
Yes.
Same thing as Florida. Last thing, it's the eavesdropping now involves the video. I'm videotaping two people. What do you think? It's a tough one.
Yeah, I would probably say still just going off the assumption in the cases I've read that the videotapes are treated much the same as the voice recordings are.
Right.
I would say again that it would be a problem if you hadn't got consent from at least one party.
Well, listen, you did a great amount of work. I use this because a lot of times my clients involve things like these types of things that they want questions or answers to before they do something. I have to tell them what the answer is. And you've done wonderful work. Somebody's watching today. They want to go to law school, but they're scared. Give them some tips. What should they do? What should they be thinking about?
I would say, honestly, something that was helpful for me, just because I feel like when you think of law school and you think of the application process, it's all very intimidating. So something that was helpful for me was listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos even. Like I would just search things like law school admissions process or how to get into law school or law school study tips. And I would watch those videos and I honestly don't know if it even really helped, but I think it gave me comfort more than anything, which is important, especially if you think this is something you want to do, but you're a little nervous about it.
Well, you're doing great work. We expect you to come back here in a couple of months and see how your law school is progressing. And I'm going to have to give you more work. That's just the way it's going to be. All right. Thanks for being on.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, stay with us. Today's verdict has so much more right after this. All right, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. We have a special show today, and we have a special guest. Danielle Caminiti is here. Danielle is not just an attorney. Danielle is a chef. Danielle, welcome to the show.
Good morning, David. How are you?
I was so excited that you were coming on. I know you've done a ton of interviews by many anchors, but I don't know how many of them really know exactly what kind of work you did as an attorney, and I do. So to move from that to being a chef is extremely intriguing for me. So before we get into the law, it is the law show, I want to get into the kitchen. So will you please tell me how you made this transition from the type of law you were practicing to being a chef?
Well, that's an interesting question. And you're right. 0 interviewers in the last 2 years have known exactly what I've been doing for my business, which was Have You Covered, which was covering court cases in the 5 boroughs on behalf of other attorneys. So it's refreshing that you know exactly what transformed with the law practice. So COVID hit in March of 2020, and I was in court every day at that time with my colleagues in person, covering cases before judges every day. And then COVID hit and the court shut down. So we were home. My son was learning virtually, as were all the kids in New York City. And we were stuck and we didn't have any guidance as to what was going on. So I turned to my kitchen as a source of empowerment. Now, I'm by no means a professional chef. I have no formal training, 0. I'm trained as an attorney, but I say I'm a foodie by birth. I'm a lawyer by trade. So I've always had a love for food, and never did I really cook as much as I started to cook when the pandemic hit.
Are there any particular recipes that you're the most fond of? The one that you're going up against Bobby Flay, and this is the one that he's got to beat you with. I mean, you got a couple of them that you're like, wow, this is the one that it blows everyone away when they come on into my house for a holiday? Or do you just love them all?
I love them all, but I have to say my pizza recipe is really killer. Love my pizza dough recipe for an at-home pizza made in a conventional oven. It's phenomenal.
Right. And I grew up in Queens. I mean, the pizzerias in Queens, I can't get that in Manhattan where I live. The Bronx is nice, but Queens pizza. So if you make great pizza, all the power to you. I have to tell you, everybody loves pizza.
Everybody loves pizza. Well, I did live in Brooklyn, and Brooklyn pizza is really.
Brooklyn pizza is pretty close to Queens, I have to say, but I'm a Queens guy. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the fact that you have transitioned and you have become a chef, and you do have a book, and people, I expect them, I'm going to get them the information, are going to go on the Amazon and buy the book. Great recipes.
Or my website. My website is havecoveredinthekitchen.com.
Okay.
So they can get it directly from me, the book as well.
Now, where do you go from here? Because you're wearing 2 hats. You're wearing a chef's hat and you're wearing an attorney's hat. What's your thoughts on that?
Good question. You know, we have no guidance as to whether the courts are opening more fully in person. Every 2 weeks, I follow the chief judge's guidance on the issue, and it's really murky at best. So a lot of the per diem attorneys that I know, and I'm sure you know, some of them moved to Florida, some of them went to work for a firm. It's tough when you have your own business to just give that all up and then go and work for somebody, because I still have clients that have needs, although it's definitely a less percentage of what it was.
But have you still been able to cover their cases virtually to make some kind of ends meet? You have. Yes,
I have. And that's the beauty of cooking at home, because you can cover the virtual conference. You can log on to a Microsoft Teams meeting and cover a motion or cover a settlement conference, but then I have a sheet pan chicken in the oven at the same time. So it's the best of both worlds, and it's been working so far. And I'm really glad to have gotten the cookbook out because I really put my heart and soul into it over the last 2 years. But again, it's definitely uncertain times still, for at least for us as per diem attorneys. And I don't know where I go from here. I do know that I'm enjoying myself and I'm feeding my family and I'm being positive. I'm staying positive, but it's still very much not back to normal in the legal world.
I have 2 questions for you. The first question is there going to be a second book?
You know, I really thought about it, and there very well may be. There are definitely some ideas, and the wheels are turning. The wheels are turning more quickly than the wheels of justice these days.
And the second question is, we're going to get back to the law. Make a prediction for me. So I'm going to take you 6 months ahead. All right.
Okay.
Where are you? Are you in the courtroom covering twice as many cases, or are you still home working on the second book?
I would say a hybrid model. Hybrid model. I'm covering double the amount of cases, but I am still working in the kitchen, developing new recipes on the second cookbook.
All right. Emil, we don't have too much time left, but in terms of your cooking, have you been sharing the meals with neighbors and other people? I mean, because it is COVID. Everyone's so afraid, at some point, I don't want to eat somebody else's food or I'll get COVID. Have you let everybody see what kind of cook you are?
Yes. So I share a lot with family, of course, and friends, but I also do some charity events, which is really nice. I'm actually donating 10 homemade pizzas this Friday. I'm bringing them to a women's shelter in Queens. So I like to give back and be able to do that. And it's really nice I did a charity for Slice Out Hunger a few months back in Brooklyn, Bridge Park, where all pizza chefs from all over the place, professional pizza chefs and home pizza chefs, got together in Brooklyn Bridge Park and made pizza and donated, I believe, $20,000 they raised. So it's nice to be able to do that. I would love to showcase my pizza and everything more. I did get a food vending license over the pandemic. No grass grew under my.
Oh, so that means you can kind of use like a food truck type of thing, right?
Right. So I do have a license, a New York license to do that.
That would be very interesting. That's how you get really discovered.
Yes.
One of those out of Prospect Park, you put you put a nice big van outside and you start selling your pizzas out like that. So
that would be awesome, because as you know, the restaurants got hit really hard with COVID.
I know that we've had a lot of politicians and a lot of people on this show who've just been discussing it. And we had somebody on last week helping the delivery men and making sure they get the money. And Andrew Ricci has been on many times. So we've been really focusing on that. But this has been a pleasure because we got to see somebody who actually knows the type of work that I do, at least, and at the same time is a cook. So we appreciate it. And we'd like you to come back maybe next couple of months. Let us know how the law practice is. And more importantly, if you wrote a second book.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great. Really nice.
It's an absolute pleasure. All right, stay with us. Today's verdict. There's so much more right after this. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you have an issue or something you would like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to email me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org. Until the next time, know your issues, reach a verdict. See you in 2 weeks.